I'm going to come out straight away and say this. I had no idea this was going to happen. Yes, YoggSaron is very quickly transitioning from mildly irritating into a full-on problem for competitive Hearthstone, and Tuskar Totemic may well be complained about more than Implosion and Piloted Shredder were. But Blizzard have decided changes need to be made, and now is the time. What's up, folks? I'm FalconePunch 55, and today I'm going to talk you through the changes that Blizzard are making to Hearthstone next week. I'll talk about how they'll affect the current metagame and what was going through Blizzard's head in order to make these changes. So I'll start with the big one, and I imagine if not for this card, Blizzard may have actually waited until the new format update next year in order to make any balancing changes whatsoever. Yogg-Saron Hope's End was a force that had to be dealt with. The card text hasn't changed, but Yogg's effect will now stop if it gets destroyed, silenced, removed from the board, or transformed. We're also making a change where spells with overload that are casted by Yogg will actually overload the person who casted the Yogg, but that's coming in a future update. Firstly, I think the change is great and long overdue, and that is coming from someone who actually really loved Yogg-Saron at first. People will still play it for fun, but personally, I think it's going to be pretty useless now. It's still a Hail Mary, just one that's less likely to actually be effective. It's not going to be clearing the entire board and drawing you cards quite as often as it used to. I haven't crunched the numbers yet myself, but you can test it yourself by playing Yogg-Saron now and seeing how effective it is up until it dies. As far as the meta goes, I don't think Yogg-Saron's nerf is actually going to kill any decks. Both Tempo Mage and Malygos Druid can just put another heavy card in, really. Maybe the decks won't be quite as effective as they used to be, but Ragnaros is a card that would quite nicely fit the slot in both decks. Blizzard did have to do something about Yogg-Saron though, given that a lot of pro players are starting to call Hearthstone a joke and nothing but a series of coin flips. And speaking of coin flips, Tuskar Totemic was one of the most frustrating. Almost a 50-50 chance of summoning one of the more powerful totems. The change is simple, basic, and does the job. Spell Power Totem will probably become the high roll from Tuskar given its new interaction with Maelstrom Portal and Spirit Claws. And I think Tuskar Totemic will still see play in some mid-rangey and Wicked Witch Doctor Shaman decks. But it won't be in every Shaman deck like it was starting to be. The card still has great synergy with Thing from Below as well, though because its average outcome is much lower, it won't quite be as frustrating to play against as it used to be. The same can be said for the other nerfed Shaman card, the Rockbiter Weapon, which is now 2 mana instead of 1. I believe this is Blizzard's way of nerfing Doomhammer without giving us all a full epic refund in dust. With Rockbiter at 2 weapons, Shaman now doesn't have any 1 mana removal if you consider Lightning Bolt to be 2 mana. Coin Totem Golem now becomes a weaker play than it used to be, and obviously Alakir and Doomhammer get hit bad. I still think Doomhammer's playable, but far weaker than it used to be. At 2 mana, it's worse for filling out the curve, and you're not often going to be getting double Rockbiter Doomhammered to death from 17 health anymore. The aggro game gets nerfed even more when you look at Abusive Sergeant. Pretty much getting the Lepidome treatment, losing 1 attack point. I think it will still see play, but then I also thought that about Lepidome when it got nerfed. Turns out a 1 mana 1/1 just isn't quite enough for an aggro deck. Even with its effect, the extra attack loss probably is a big deal. It loses 33% of its stats after all. This nerf will impact Shaman, Hunter, Zoo, and any other aggressive deck in the game. Abusive Sergeant is everywhere. Kinda like another card I can think of that got nerfed. Hunter also gets hit with Call of the Wild getting promoted to a 9 mana card. I have to say I never understood why Call of the Wild was 8 mana to begin with. 3 Animal Companions should put it at least 9 mana, and then the fact that you get 3 cards for 1, I make that 10 or 11 mana even mathematically, being the right mana cost for the card. Obviously 11 mana is ridiculous, so 9 actually does seem fair. I asked HCT caster and hunter enthusiast Raven, and this is what he had to say. Call of the Wild on 8 mana was instrumental in bringing Hunter into the top spot in the metagame, but going forward as new expansions release, it was probably needed to nerf as it is a very powerful card in its own right and might push Hunter past being strong to being overpowered. So Hunter was too weak, Call of the Wild helped it get strong, and now it needs to get nerfed or Hunter would be too powerful. Yeah, I can get behind that. The most important things to note here is firstly, at 9 mana, a Call of the Wild can't be played on turn 8 or coined out on turn 7. And it also can't be played with the Hunter hero power, making it slightly less effective as an aggressive win condition. Warrior loses charge, which means that Worgen and Arcane Giant and any other OTK warriors are essentially dead. I don't think the card will be playable in other decks. Some people are saying it could activate patrons or be used as a board clear with Magnetor Alpha. I don't really see it. As far as I'm concerned, charge has been removed from the game, along with it some of the most frustrating, least interactive decks, and I'm okay with that. Cthulhu's Cycle Warrior still exists, and that's not too different. Finally, Warrior also loses Execute, and I'll be honest, I don't completely understand this change. It's not going to make too much of a difference to control Warrior. It's probable that this nerf was conceived back when Dragon Warrior was at its peak, which would make sense because Execute was a very powerful tempo play in that deck. So that's understandable. Warrior still has Shield Slam as a 1 mana removal, and this nerf doesn't really damage the class, just makes it a little less frustrating to play against. That's the nerfs. Make sure you let me know your opinions of them on my Twitter, or the YouTube comments, or Hearthhead's comment section, or Hearthhead's new Discord. I do my best to try and read and reply to everything, so be sure to hit me up on one of those if you have an opinion. You can check out Hearthhead's article on the changes. They've gotten some other pro players' opinions, so check out the link in the description below. And follow Hearthhead on Facebook and Twitter, like this video if you enjoyed it, and make sure you subscribe to the channel. I will see you again next week.